I am sorry I can't speak Korean. I wish I could. I just want to tell you that I think this place is beautiful. Thank you, Mrs. Lee, for this extremely nice invitation and this beautiful campus. Everything is about beauty and order, what I like, and design. That's exactly what I like and what I need. Because I arrived in Korea and on Monday morning. It's my 4th day in Korea, and it's my first trip to Asia. I've been everywhere in the world, but the first time in Asia. And this has looked like one whole year. Because so many things happened. So many things happened in this country, in this city. Since I arrived, you have no idea. No idea. But this place makes me feel very good. And it looks like the Rothko Chapel, which is the place he made and which was essential, voilà, j'ai compris, which was essential to his work. Here. Can you hear me better now? Okay. So the first thing I want to tell you is that here there are many nice people who are responsible for having me here. Everybody from the French embassy. Second thing is my publisher here, Mr. Park, here. He's get up, here. He did this beautiful book. This book is a work of art, and he is an artist. He stuck every single label by hand. And I have had 6 editions of this book in different languages until today, and this is the most beautiful. So you have to look at the book, and if you have the money, you buy it, okay? But he can give you a discount if you buy many, okay? He's good. And I have my friends here, Subok and Miran, who have been my angels since I arrived. They have transformed a tragedy into hope in 4 days. They have opened all the doors in Korea for me. And believe it or not, they married here 33 years ago, so for them. So now I want to tell you that I am very proud to speak in a woman university because I am a feminist. I am not crazy feminist because I have a husband and I love him and I think we need men, but also we need to assert ourselves, okay? And I think that, you know, feminine universities, it shows in the United States that they have better results, you know? So this is a big event for me as well, to speak in a university for women. And the last thing I want to add is that yesterday night I went to see the play about Mark Roscoe called Red. And I met with the actor who plays his role. He's called, what's his name? You know him? And he sends you his regards, okay? He says, send the regard to the students. Okay. Now, I want to tell you that I am somebody very non-conventional. I don't like people who think the same thing as I think. I think that the best students are the students who challenge their teacher. I know it's not the tradition. Not in France and not in Korea. But I want to tell you that that's what I want from you. I want you to write down what I say and to organize questions in your head and to challenge me afterwards, okay? Are you ready for that? What I'm going to present to you is my opinion. It's not your opinion. Your opinion is in between. You know, you have to build your own opinion against me. You know, I'm not a model. I don't think anybody is a model. I'm just telling you what I have done, okay? And, all right, so if you agree with that, let's go, okay? So, Mark Roscoe is a man whose name changed many times because he was born in Russia as Markus Rotkovich, and he changed his name many times. These are few biographical elements. He was born in 1903. He went to the US, he was 10 years old. He became an artist, he was 23 years old. Then he became an American citizen and changed his name. Then he committed suicide, okay? and then the Roscoe Chapel was built. That's all you need to know about him. But there is much, much more than that. First of all, some people who will tell you about him just mentioning the colors of his paintings and his art. So here is his art, but I will not do that. I just show you his art chronologically, okay? He first is representational, figurative, then mythological, abstract, multiform, and then he goes into what people call his signature style. Colors, rectangles of colors floating on top of the other one. And that is very successful. And at a certain time, he will stop doing that, and he is interested in something else. And now I'm going to describe to you my own approach. First of all, I think that Roscoe did everything thanks to the help of fantastic women. First of all, Peggy Guggenheim, she was his first gallerist. She showed his work in 1943. Then it was Betty Parsons. And then in 1952, at the Museum of Modern Art, it was Dorothy Miller. So women in America are very powerful. It's a very feminist country. They had the right to vote much before France. In the United States, women can vote since 1913. In France, it's only 1946. So we're very late in that. I don't know in Korea when the women got the vote to right to the right to vote. Do you know? Do you know which year? No? No, you don't know? Are they allowed to vote today? 1945. No, okay, it's like France. But in the United States, women carried over the work of the artists. The artists were a minority, and women helped artists to express themselves. And the last two women who were very important in Roscoe's life were Catherine Koo at the Institute of Chicago. She respected him and helped him to write his letters and to do a beautiful show in 1955. And the last but not the least is Dominique de Ménil, who was French, who was a friend of mine, who was an immigrant like Roscoe, and who helped him build the Roscoe Chapel at the end of his life. Okay, so now that I have made my statement, nothing is possible without women of talent in Roscoe's life, I'm going to tell you that for me, Roscoe's message is not so much about colors, but about borders and maps and migrations. And it is a social history. First of all, he's an immigrant. He's an immigrant who came from Russia, thrown out of Russia by the pogroms against Jews in the beginning of the 20th century. He traveled to the United States in a boat like that. He came first by train, then by boat, then by train again. And when he crossed the United States at the age of 10, he was carrying around his neck a label that said, "I don't speak English." He was a little boy dressed in black, and he said it was the most painful time of his life. Then, when he was a painter, he traveled a lot back to Europe, to Italy, to France, to England, and he learned a lot, and he learned a lot by traveling. My message to you is about travels, changes. People who travel, people who are migrants, who experience many cultures, have more cards in their hands for creativity than people who don't move, okay? So this is the case of Mark Roscoe. He also traveled a lot in New York, where he had many studios for his art and many apartments to live in. So he was constantly traveling. But he was also living in the chaos of the 20th century in Europe, which was a century of wars. You know, Europe had two world wars, 1914, 1918, 1939, 1945, which basically destroyed Europe. So this is Mark Roscoe sitting as a little boy, very serious, at the age of 10, at the age of 5, very serious, and you can see that the man on top of him standing is his cousin, you know, worldly man presenting him, you know, but little Mark Roscoe is a very good student, He's a very good student. He goes to a religious school, Jewish religious school, because it's the only way for him not to go into the army. So he had to go through that. And he will always remain an intellectual, a very good student. When he arrives in the United States, the intellectual paradigm is essential in his life. He will always remain a writer, somebody who writes what he feels and who attacks institutions when he doesn't agree with them. That happens when he's 12 years old. You see his name, Marcus Rodkovich, in the journal of his high school because it's forbidden to Jews. So he manages to get to write in another newspaper, and he writes that he doesn't agree with that. So whenever he feels something he disagrees, he's writing it, he's expressing it. It's not about suppressing what you feel, it's expressing your ideas clearly. Then, with his two friends, he gets into Yale University. You have heard about Yale University. It's basically one of the best universities in the world. And he was not speaking English at the age of 10, but 6 years later, he manages to get into Yale, which is basically a great achievement. So here you can see that they say in the newspaper, 3 Russian boys, none of whom has been in this country longer than 7 years, are getting into Yale. So it's a fantastic achievement. And because of that, they're very proud to get into Yale. Laetitia, j'aurais besoin de mon livre version anglaise qui est dans mon sac derrière. Désolée. So here he gets into Yale, and you see he thinks that he doesn't look like this. You see in the picture? He writes with his hand, "I don't look like this," because he looks stiff and, awkward. So, and apart from his merci beaucoup. Thank you, Laetitia. Apart from his great pleasure to get into Yale, he's very proud of it, but the story is much more complicated. Because in 1920, when he arrives at Yale, Yale is full of Jewish students. And the Jewish students are the best. Exactly like I was at Stanford University 2 weeks ago, and everybody told me the Korean students are the best at Stanford. But there are too many. So I know that Koreans are working extremely hard, that is a country which is extremely efficient. And the same thing happened at Yale for Roscoe. And this is what the president wrote. I think that we have to change our mind in regard to the Jewish element. They are getting there too rapidly. Every single scholarship is won by a Jew. If we don't educate them, they will overrun us. We must put a ban on the Jews. So it's very unjust because, he works very hard. He achieves what he's doing. He gets into the best university, and the university says, you are too many. So it's very unfair. And Roscoe understands that the university is basically helping the people who are good at sports, athletes, and the people who are well-brought, good families, but not good students. So he decides to create a newspaper called the Yale Saturday Evening Pest, just to fight that, to fight the values at the time, which are false gods, he called it, false gods, idols of clay. There is only one way to smash them, and that is a revolution in mind and in spirit in the student body at Yale. Let us doubt, let us think that is enough. So he rejects this order. He is a rebel. He is a revolutionary. I don't accept that order. It's not what I was brought up for. I like education. I'm a good student. I have to be respected. So what he does is the first big event of his life. He's going to leave the university. He goes away from Yale after a year and a half, and he decides to become an artist. He becomes an artist. It's the first decision he makes. So basically, when you don't agree You should not be passive, you should be active. So he becomes active. He stands up. Instead of being treated like that, he becomes an artist. He becomes an artist as an epiphany by accident and as a necessity, because to respect himself, he is forced to have an identity in American society, and it's only by becoming an artist. So he works with the help of two professors, Milton Avery and Max Weber, who become mentors for him and teach him a lot. And then he becomes an educator, a great professor, thanks to the ideas of John Dewey, who believes that every single student has the truth in himself. The teacher should not force his ideas on the students, but he has to help the students to express themselves the way they want, as many opinions as they want. That's what education is all about. And that's the way that Mark Roscoe is going to stay in his life, an intellectual, a writer, an artist, and an educator. These four roles he always will follow. Then, as an artist, he is part of a group. This group is called the Group of the Ten. Bolotowski, Solman, Rodkovich, Kufeld, Chabakov, Gottlieb, Harris, Schanker, Weinman. They call themselves the Group of the Ten, but they are only 9. But nobody cares, apparently. But all of them are born abroad or are first-generation immigrants in the United States. But as you will see, what they share is the experience of the immigrant. Because when you see how they paint very diversely. One is painting figurative, one is painting abstract, one is painting, surrealist. They don't share the aesthetics, they share the social experience. This is why I think that the social experience is more important than the aesthetics. That's the basis of all experience. Now, he goes on as a fighter with a group of very important artists. Later on, the irascible group of advanced artists. They are hungry, they are irascible. The Metropolitan Museum has forced to do an exhibition of American art, and this American art they find very old-fashioned, very traditional, and they say it. They reject the Metropolitan. Mark Roscoe, Barnett Newman, Jackson Pollock, William de Kooning. And they say to the president of the Metropolitan, we don't agree with what you're doing. And as an artist, Mark Roscoe is also the second rejection he does, the second great moment of his life, is when in 1940 he stops painting for a whole year. It's the year the Nazis are all over Europe, 1940. And for one whole year, he stops writing. He stops painting, and he writes a book. He writes a book of a historian, of a sociologist, of an intellectual, all about what is the function of art in society. What is the function of an artist? Why are there artists in societies? What are they used for? And he goes back to the antiquities. What were the artists doing in the Greek times, in the Egyptian times, in the Renaissance, So he revisits art history, thinking what were the golden times for artists, in which period, in which country. So he does an encyclopedic research. And when he gets out of that, he writes a few wonderful sentences. Art is not only a form of action, it's a form of social action. If you are an artist, it's because you fight for your society. And then he describes the history of art is the history of men who, for the most part, have preferred hunger to compliance. It's better to be hungry than to accept the order that you don't agree with. Okay? So basically, it's always a lesson in subversion. Learning how to be yourself, to stand up, to be proud of yourself, to be proud of what you think, even if it's not the majority. Okay? So he notices that the artist, this is the history of the artist. The artist is the one who prefers hunger to compliance. So, and the painter he will identify with is Rembrandt. You know Rembrandt in the 17th century, so 3 centuries before him, because Rembrandt really reinvented himself at the end of his life. I told you that Roscoe was always traveling. He goes to the West Coast, California, San Francisco, and he loves San Francisco, and he met with Clifford Steele, who taught him how to paint great paintings, big paintings, abstract paintings. And in New York, he saw Henri Matisse, who painted this red studio. You have seen it, right? And the red studio is a very important piece because Roscoe saw it in 1950 when it arrived at MoMA. And this painting tells you everything about the artist because it's a studio. And you see all the paintings in progress that the artist is doing, even the sculptures. So they are paintings that the artist is still working on. They are not finished, they are in progress. And this big void you see at the center of the painting, down in the center, it's a place where the artist should stand. It's a place, that's where he sits, or he stands up and he paints, he finishes. So these paintings, I think, tells you that in this void you have the metaphor of the artist. If the artist comes back and finishes these paintings, they become works of art, and they become eternal, and they go to museums. If he's not coming, they go to garbage. So in this void, you can read that the artist is extremely powerful in a society. The artist is the one who's capable of bringing his art, his production of symbolic production. An artist is producing symbols, symbolic. This symbolic production has an enormous value, and the artist, therefore, is a very powerful person in a society. So after seeing this red studio of Matisse, Marc Roscoe is changing completely his art and going into his rectangles floating on top of each other that I showed you before. Now, he's very successful. He's sold very well. He's showed very well. But at a certain time, he decides that he doesn't want to go on like that. He's decided to change completely. And he becomes a pioneer. So we see how the immigrant becomes an artist to find his identity in American society, and how the artist is going to become a pioneer for other reasons. He is being commissioned a series of frescoes in a restaurant on Park Avenue, in the Seagram building. And the restaurant is called the Four Seasons. For that, he gets $30,000 in 1958, which is a huge amount of money at the time. And for a whole year, he buys another studio, very big, and he works on these new panels. That gives him the idea that it's much more interesting for the public to be surrounded by works of art than to see only one work of art. But he's not completely happy with what he's doing, and he goes to Europe for the summer of 1959. First, he sees Greek temples, so another type of architecture. Not this one, which is the architecture of the American capitalists, like a lot of money, a lot of pressure. He sees the Greek temples. Somebody told him, "Do you like Greek temples?" He said, "I have the feeling I have always painted Greek temples in my life without even knowing it." Then he goes to Florence and sees the architecture of the Renaissance. This is San Marco, and this is a painting by Fra Angelico. And he feels that in a cell surrounded with art, it's a very good way of getting a lot of experience from the art world. And then he goes to England, and he sees a medieval chapel in ruin. And then he says, all of a sudden, now I realize that it is exactly there that I want to have my panels. I feel much better that the public is surrounded by my art in this ruin, medieval ruin, than on Park Avenue. The people who buy a dinner for $1,000 are not the people for whom I want to do my paintings. I want to do my painting for everybody, for people who are not even educated in art, who cannot pay this money, you know. I want because he's an educator, he knows how to describe the relationship he needs between the public and his art. He said, I want the people who come to see my paintings to cry in front of my paintings and have the same emotion as I had when I painted them. And he thinks that buying a dinner for $1,000 is not a good emotion. Do you agree? I do agree. Okay, so we do agree. So basically, he comes back to New York, and after a year, he goes to these people and says, thank you very much. I give you back the $30,000. I take back my panels, but I am not going to do them in the Seagram building. Okay, that's what the play Red is about also, you said. Now, he decides that his art is not going to be taken by the money market, you know, by the financial elements. His art is about something else, which is spiritual values, intellectual values. So he decides to become a pioneer. Even if the market wants that, he doesn't want the market. He wants something else. And that's when he meets Dominique de Ménil. This woman is, like him, an immigrant. She comes from France. She's a Protestant turned Catholic, but she's extremely rich. But she's not like the rich people of Park Avenue. She puts her money at the service of the African Americans, the black people who have been oppressed. She supports the revolutionaries of Nicaragua. So she is what we call a radical leftist, very rich radical leftist, okay? So there are two trajectories of immigrants who both of them have attacked the institutions of America because the United States institutions do not work for them. So these two immigrants will meet and create a new kind of institution, the Roscoe Chapel. And my message to you is that immigrants can become revolutionary social agents in a society. They can become key agents. They can find solutions that people don't find. So together, Marc Roscoe and Dominique de Ménil invented the Roscoe Chapel. She said it's a sacred place, open to all every day. It's an ecumenical chapel, but it's also a chapel for people who don't believe in God, atheists, you see? This is my case, if you want to know the whole truth. So, I feel that way here, you know? I feel that this place doesn't have any label on it, you know, here. So, what I find incredible is that Dominique de Ménil is going to help with her money, is going to help Marc Roscoe manage to produce exactly the project he had since he wrote his book, The Artist's Reality. Since he wrote his book, he had in his head the project that art should be an experience for everybody. And he wants to touch everybody. So she gave him the possibility to do it in this chapel. This is a chapel in Houston. You should go there. It's extraordinary. In front, you know, you have this sculpture called the Broken Obelisk. It has been done by Barnett Newman, and it's dedicated to Martin Luther King, you know, the black American leader. And to this place, it was inaugurated in February 1971, exactly a year after Rothko committed suicide, a year, day per day. It was opened by Dominique de Ménil, and for 45 years now, it has become a meeting place for all political leaders from all over the world, and even spiritual leaders like Nelson Mandela, the Dalai Lama, Desmond Tutu, who believe in non-violence. You see? So it is a very special place, unique in the world, actually. But what was so special about that? So you see here the entrance. It's very simple. And when you walk, actually, I was fortunate enough I was invited to speak there in a year ago. And it's to give a lecture there for the 50th anniversary of the commission of this chapel. So when you sit there, you see panels of one color. You have benches, you can sit and watch. And there's no labels on the wall. It's very dark. The paintings are very low, and there's nothing to do but to meditate or to look at the art. Now, some critics have written that Rothko's evolution went to a darker color, darker palette, and that's what explains his suicide. I don't agree with that. In fact, Rothko didn't go to a darker palette. He went to some other project, which was, he worked like a scientist to transform his colors into fluorescent pigments. He wanted the retina of the public to be attracted in his painting as by a magnet. He wanted to create an interaction between the art and the public. He wanted art to become an experience that helps you become empowered with yourself. You become an actor of your life. It's nothing mystical. And that's why I disagree with the way that the Hungarian place has showed this exhibition, because it looks mystical. Rothko was not mystical. He was just political, social. And he didn't want to turn you into monks, no, absolutely not. He wanted to turn you into positive human beings, active human beings. Especially, when you see these panels, there's one panel at the entrance, one panel at the back, and all everywhere, 12. He had the idea of that when he went to a chapel in Venice called the Torcello Church. It was a Byzantine church, and he loved the tension between what he called tragedy and hope, which is what he thinks the key tension in a society. So he tried to reproduce this tension between tragedy and hope. And for me, the tension that all young immigrants, even all young people, face, and is something that you can solve in different ways. In France, we had a tragedy recently in January. I don't know if you heard about it, Charlie Hebdo. You heard that, this massacre of journalists. So it was done by immigrants who had no hope. So they went into criminals. They went into these assassinations. But there are other examples of immigrants like Rothko and Dominique de Menil, who went into something completely different. So this is something I want to make you aware of, that the message of immigrants can be the one of becoming a transforming agent of a society in a grand way. Because Rothko's last period goes even way beyond that. This man, Brian Robertson, was a British man who understood exactly what Rothko wanted. And this is what he wrote about Rothko's paintings. I think it's the most beautiful thing ever written. My strongest personal memory is of leaving the Whitechapel Gallery with Rothko one winter afternoon when the daylight had practically gone. He asked me to switch all the lights off everywhere, and suddenly Rothko's color made its own light. The effect, once the retina had adjusted itself, was unforgettable, smoldering and blazing and glowing softly from the walls, color in darkness. We stood there a long time, and I wished everyone could have seen the world Rothko had made in those perfect conditions, radiating its own energy and uncorrupted by artifice or the marketplace. You can also take light as a metaphor for truth. You can also think of Plato in the cavern, and the light in the cavern. You can think of many things. But what I want you to see in this sentence is, making its own light, and that Rothko's art is uncorrupted by the market. Okay? So we have to fight to keep art pure and reachable to everybody, and not only by people who can pay for it, you know? And you have to know that the Roscoe Chapel is free. The entrance is free, okay? Now, but Roscoe's goes much beyond that. You know, he's crossing all kinds of boundaries, you know, intellectual, writer, painter, educator, politician, you know. He's crossing boundaries between countries, geographical, Europe, the United States, back to Europe. He's crossing boundaries in all directions, but he's even crossing time boundaries. He's reaching us today. He's reaching us up to the 21st century, and he's reaching out to anthropological boundaries and reaching out to Asia, you know. I just heard that there was already a Roscoe show 10 years ago. Christopher Roscoe told me, I spoke to his son this morning on the phone in New York. I'm going to show a picture of him. And this is where Roscoe is today. He demanded the Roscoe rooms the way he demanded them, like in the dark, very peaceful, surrounded by art. First of all, at the Phillips Collection in Washington, D.C., the Roscoe Room at the Tate Modern Museum in London, in the Roscoe Chapel in Houston, at the National Gallery in New York, in Washington, in the Mark Roscoe Center in Daugavpils, the city where he was born, in Latvia, where I was on Sunday for the whole week, and I'll tell you more about it. And even more recently, the Roscoe Murals at Harvard University, where I was there also. So these are the permanent Roscoe rooms in the world, respecting what he wanted, that the public sits and watches and interacts with the painting. These are the traveling shows of Roscoe recently. Warsaw in Poland, Gemen Museum in The Hague in the Netherlands, where I was recently, a wonderful show, and Hangaram Art Museum in Seoul, Korea. I made a mistake in Seoul. I have to add an O. Now I know you have to write an O. But so there is a global presence of Roscoe today. And there's even a more global presence, which I just completely disagree with, which is putting Roscoe on the milk. It's very trendy. And Roscoe, even if he didn't want to, he manages to be on the market. And at the auction sales, his art is selling always more and more. Last week in New York, this one sold $42 million, and this one sold $80 million. So he wins on the spiritual level and on the market level, both. He wins in Europe, he wins in Asia, okay? So this is Roscoe. And this is him with his son, Christopher, who was 4 years old on the picture, and with whom I spoke today from Mr. Park's cell phone, right? I borrowed his cell phone to call Christopher Roscoe and to tell him I was in Seoul and to tell him that the students are wonderful and they just admire the art of his father, and then the artists are, the actor was very moved to present, you know, his character in the play Red. He said it's the most difficult role I ever had in my 30 years of career. It's the most difficult role. So I said, you know, because you are presenting the artist's function to the public in Seoul. And it's very important that the public understands what it is to be an artist and how hard it is to be an artist. It's not easy. You have to express yourself, you have to find a gallery, a critic, a collector, a museum. You have to protect yourself against money, you know, because the $80 million that the people are making, it doesn't go to the family, it goes to the pockets of the rich people. You know, it doesn't go to the artist. You know, who's making money out of it? Not the artist, you know. The artist remains poor. It's people, you know, who are, speculating, you know. Now, Christopher Roscoe was 6 years old when his father committed suicide. Nevertheless, he published the book that I showed you, the manuscript that the father wrote in 1940. It was never published, never. So in 2005, he transcribed it he published it, and he made it public to everybody. So he gave the voice of his father back to his father. And then he taught us what the project of Mark Roscoe was. It was a political project, a social project, an intellectual project. I want to tell you also that if Mark Roscoe committed suicide, it's because his gallerist, his agent, was a crook, was harassing him. And when he committed suicide, the gallerist went into his studio, took the paintings for a very low price, and wanted to send them to Europe. They did the same thing in his wife's apartment when she died 6 months later. So the daughter, who was 17, and the son, who was 6, started a lawsuit against the gallerist. And after 14 years, they won. They got that back. But it was the most shocking lawsuit in art history, because the gallerist understood that these 800 wonderful paintings were worth a lot of money, and they wanted to take the money for them. So the son and the daughter fought the powerful gallerist. You don't have to be afraid of powerful people. You have to fight them. If they're wrong, you know, you're going to win. And they won. They won against these powerful people. And they won, and they put their paintings in the National Gallery of Art. And that's the reason why you can see them in Seoul today. You know, the children won. The justice won. And something else happened. Their father was born in Russia. Russia was a big empire, and in 1920, the place where their father was born became Latvia, a new country called Latvia. Mark Roscoe never went back to Latvia, but his children went back, and some people decided to create a Mark Roscoe Center in the city called Daugavpils. They decided to go, even if this country has destroyed the Jewish culture that existed. There were 100,000 Jews, very active, very nice, very bright people, and they were destroyed in 3 weeks by the German Nazis and the Latvians. Nobody knew the name of Mark Roscoe. Nothing remains. Nevertheless, the children went. I was there on the 23rd of April, 2013, 2 years ago. What did they do? They brought from their own collection 8 beautiful paintings to give to the Latvian people. When I think about it, it gives me chills, even today, with a wonderful smile to this country, which erased the culture of their family, of their father. And this is what Kate said. When I was a little girl, my father would often sit next to me with a map. He would show me this territory at the crossroads of Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland, and say, you cannot really see, because now there are new borders, different from those of my time. Still, this is where I was born. And I could not help thinking that the borders are blurred now. The borders are blurred exactly like the borders between Roscoe's color, you know, the colors floating on top of each other. So this is why we are mesmerized by the paintings, because we don't know where to look. We don't know which border to look. So he has managed, metaphorically, to give you the same puzzlement as the one he had. Where do I belong? Where do I come from? What is my country? So this is an extraordinary message, you know, that he managed to bring out his own puzzlement to you, and that his children were able to bring out as a gesture of gift to a country which destroyed everything. Now, in his book, Mark Roscoe had written that the artist has a mission, and this mission is to repair the world. It comes from something in Hebrew that says, Tikkun ha'olam. I speak Hebrew. I happen to speak it, that's why I can tell you in Hebrew. The reparation of the world. So this is one of the things that the children did in respect to their father's memory. This is the house where he was born, Daugavpils. I was there last week. I took the picture for you, to show it to you. And this is a lake where he was born. And I wanted to bring it to you to show to you that he was born in a country of light, the Baltic light, where there's no night now. You know, at 11 p.m. it's still day. So there's almost no night around, you know, May and June. So he was born in this kind of country. So this is how I'm going to end, on the picture of this wonderful little boy, an immigrant, an artist, a pioneer, who managed to bring the light to us all, and who taught us that never accept the rejection, never accept the power, always express your own truth. So now I'm listening to your questions. Thank you very much.